have the labor to drive advanced manufacturing in the U.S.? Elizabeth Berthelette is head of Northeast Research and National Life Science Research with Newmark. Hello, Liz.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And thank you for being with me. Tell me about this latest report from Newmark on manufacturing momentum, scaling for success in key markets. Whom did you survey, and what did you seek to learn?
Yeah, the second iteration of our three paper series on advanced manufacturing in North America really encompasses the drivers of growth in this sector. We spent a lot of time talking about labor, but we really looked at markets where there have been major advanced manufacturing announcements, those that have over 100 million in initial investment. And, that happened to cover over 160 metro areas and locations throughout the US mostly. And we took a look at all of the various economic factors that come into play when thinking about where should advanced manufacturers locate, what do they need, what are the factors that come into play for future growth as well.
So do we define the term advanced manufacturing purely by the size of the investment or the nature of the manufacturing? How do you define that term?
So it actually encompasses a couple of different subsectors. And what we found to belong to what we're calling advanced manufacturing, which I guess is a little bit ambiguous, but we're looking at high-tech digitalization, so the production of semiconductors.
I
We're
see.
looking at transportation in terms of electric vehicles, electric vehicle parts and batteries. We're also looking at energy, so solar and batteries related to energy or clean tech. And then finally, biomanufacturing, which is the production of pharmaceuticals and drugs.
Okay, so all of this is happening against the backdrop of a supposed resurgence in U.S. manufacturing as companies are, quote unquote, reshoring operations from Asia. Where are the key areas of growth in the U.S. right now, according to your findings?
We decided to look at a number of different markets, and we looked at the size of the market. So when you're talking about Phoenix or Detroit, clearly they're in a much different ballgame than Albany, New York. So we
Sure.
decided to tranche everything by population size, and then we looked at the top 5 growth markets within those 3 tranches. So of the large markets, it's Phoenix, Austin, Detroit, Charlotte, I believe. And then once you get down to some of the mid-sized markets, it's Syracuse, Albany, New York, some places in Charleston, South Carolina, and then some of the smaller markets and micro markets, because some of these locations are actually very rural or outside what you would consider a major MSA. You've got Savannah, Georgia, or Sherman, Texas, Elizabethtown, Kentucky. So it kind of runs the gamut on where they are, but I would say generally a lot of these locations are in the South, Southeast particularly, and Texas, and in the Midwest.
To the extent you can generalize at all, because I do understand that the dynamics of these various regions are going to vary quite a bit, but do we have the people with the right skills in general to support the spread of advanced manufacturing domestically?
So a number of these markets do already possess a fairly deep labor pool within advanced manufacturing. There are some transferable skills. So what we found in our analysis is the background for some of these employees or labor pool are computer scientists or mechanical engineers. So they run the gamut of different industries, but so those transferable skills could be pulled from a different industry to work in advanced manufacturing. Although I will say the smaller markets in general have smaller labor pools. So overall,
Makes
the
sense. Yeah.
economies are just smaller. So I think our analysis really points to some of those markets may have more difficulty in growing the labor they need, or they may have to capture labor from further away than, say, a market like Phoenix or Austin.
Did you identify any mismatches between where manufacturing wants to locate and where the labor is?
No, that's an interesting question. I don't think we have come up with any mismatches, so to speak. I think there's either an established cluster, or what often comes into play are sort of local incentives as well. So there's a lot of municipalities and counties and states that are trying to attract these high paying, highly skilled operations. So in addition to labor, incentives are important. Abundant land, developable land, abundant power, and the cost of power needs to be low enough to make these operations make sense. So there's a
Yeah.
lot that comes into play, but we haven't found any sort of mismatch necessarily.
I guess that makes sense. I can imagine that a manufacturer would say, I would really like to locate in region A, but oh my goodness, I just found out there's not enough labor. It seems like the labor decision would come before would be necessary for them to make that determination in the first place, right?
We found that labor is one of the most important decision makers, but there's obviously a lot that goes into site selection analyses, and labor definitely being top of the list.
Mm-hmm. Where labor might be an issue in those regions where labor availability is questionable or not up to snuff completely, what does it take to boost it? As you said, drawing labor from other markets, or I wonder what other kinds of solutions do you see out there that could address this issue?
So in our research, we found some employers that work in this sector already in rural areas versus more populated areas mentioned that they utilize bonus incentives, higher pay, marketing cheaper housing. So, you could attract employment to these areas because the cost of living is much lower than some of these other major markets. One area that we focus on as well in the report is sort of the homegrown university in community colleges, as well as training programs. So really training up students and young people to fill that pipeline of labor organically through universities.
Mm-hmm. You talked about local incentives in the like counties, cities, even maybe states. I'm wondering if you think that recent federal government actions, such as the CHIPS Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, have also helped to spur advanced manufacturing and labor availability in key markets.
Certainly, I do think that those federal programs really have incited or at least helped to accelerate growth or potential growth within this sector. We've certainly seen the supply chain disruptions as sort of a catalyst for nearshoring and reshoring, but that investment from the federal government has certainly helped impact growth in this sector.
Well, Liz, it appears to hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it just seems that despite certain fears about an across the board labor shortage in so many industries, it doesn't seem like you're identifying any real issues that are going to hinder the growth of advanced manufacturing in the US. Would that be a fair statement?
I mean, every growth sector is going to have challenges, right? So I'm not saying that there won't be challenges, but there certainly are avenues to address those potential challenges. And as we continue to see this sector mature, I think that will, come to light as to what those challenges might be. I do think that labor is very, very important, and it'll be interesting to see once a number of these facilities get built, how does that play out, right? So there's infrastructure considerations to take into consideration. And in our third report in our series, we will address that more in terms of who pays for the infrastructure, how do you develop in a very rural area, and what do you need to grow sort of all of the ancillary businesses that you would need, battery storage and recycling, other supply chain businesses that help these advanced manufacturers operate. So all of those things are certainly top of mind as well. But I think the the overall story is very positive.
Well, we will look out for that third report that answers a lot of other key questions. In the meantime, we'll link to the current report in the notes to this video. And anyway, though, Liz Berthelette of Newmark, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with me to talk about this crucial issue. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.